howdy, brothers, sisters, and everyone in between, inside and out, and all that is us. I'm Matyas, Orthodox priest, artist, philosopher, and humanist. Join me as we explore the inner and outer universes through topics that touch each and every one of us. Hello, everyone. On this podcast, we wax and wane between all the universes, the inside and the out. And, today we're going to go more personal. I have here a marvelous homily from a mentor of mine named Steve Morris. He doesn't know he's a mentor of mine, of course, but, yet he is. I think the wonderful thing about being out and about is having a lot of influences from a lot of places and being able to gel all those into one good place. So we're going to talk about a pretty delicate topic today, but one that gives unbridled strength. It was that glorious dandy queen, Quentin Crisp, who said, if at first you don't succeed, well then failure may be your style. I think you may have been onto something there, but perhaps we might need to accept failure as part of a more general pattern of life in our own personal ministries, and just perhaps, it can become our teacher when we're here talking about our mentors. The perfect body, career, and family are dangled in front of us, and even though we know that these images of perfection can't really be true, why is that? Well, because life gets in the way, right? And we seem almost programmed to fail. That's the perception a lot of times. The crumb of comfort here is that every book of the Bible, for those of us who are Christians, is alive with failure and disappointment. Failure is the proving ground. It's the soil, the fertile soil of all the great characters in the Bible throughout history. And they fail in spectacular fashion, don't they? We start with the incident with the apple in the garden, and things go pretty much downhill from there. And what is perhaps most surprising are the creative ways that characters in the Bible scripture find, if we use them as an example, they find a way to fail. Samson and David had moral failures. Cain and Abel implode after a family breakdown, right? There is also spectacular stupidity. Indeed, stupidity on a grand scale. And if we scroll forward to today's world, the pattern of failure is remarkably unchanged because we're all human. Pride still comes before a fall, right? And what if failure wasn't or isn't the worst thing that could happen to us? What a concept, huh? It's hard to think this way when you're in the middle of a major cock-up, right? We need a bit of perspective to appreciate the riches offered by getting it all wrong and by losing. Judy Murray spoke recently about the importance of competition in sport, especially for the young. It is competition, this very human drive and feeling that teaches us that we sometimes fail, and that does push us forward. But I think this is only part of the importance of failure. Failure is the curative to personal exceptionalism, right? Personal exceptionalism, and possibly false pride. It's the thing that filters the negativity from our ego. Failure pinpricks the inner voices that tell us that we could conquer the world if only we tried a bit harder, that we are quote-unquote gifted, right? In fact, we would all be a lot happier if we accepted our averageness and our ordinariness. That's absolutely true. We often attribute our successes to our own brilliance and wonderfulness in all these different ways, when in fact, we just happen to be the right person at the right time in most cases. Just about anyone could have made a success in that business, in that endeavor, at that particular time, that family, that church, if they had had the same support and breaks as we had. And so let me use another example from the Bible. Christ's followers, the lions and lionesses who gave birth to the church, were a distinctly flawed bunch. We need to look no further than Peter as the grand embodiment of redeemed failure. In today's world, he would surely be canceled. That is absolutely true. After all, he denied God 3 times, right? Why did it happen? He was scared, yes. But also, he always wanted to be liked. We see it later in his ministry, too. He didn't want to look silly in front of a young woman, right, that was in the garden of the high priest's house. Suddenly facing a moment of truth, Peter reverts to his default setting and says, it wasn't me. Now, today he would be cast into the outer darkness reserved for other public cowards and turncoats. But this isn't what happens as a part of the world of Christ. Instead, Peter is gently rehabilitated. He still has weaknesses, still makes mistakes, but the mistakes are no match for the love of God. I have. Listen to these words, okay? I have. What does it bring up to you? What do you feel when you say that to yourself? A feeling of accomplishment for having something? What if that something was given to you? Is I have the same? How then do we measure our successes, you say? Well, are our successes more important than our failures? That's a bit to think about there, right? There's a strong feeling for some humanitarian folks that our mistakes as, well, people who want to do right and as leaders, well, they're much more important than our successes. Indeed, every shiny and successful pet project or ministry needs a big old failure to combat pride and perfectionism. This brings me to Steve Morris' story, one he tells often of his own spectacular failure and how it changed his life for the better. He was running a very successful brand agency, and for about 6 years, everything he touched seemed to turn into gold. And this is one of those classic spawning grounds for failure, because it encourages us to think that we know better than everyone else, right? When we've had success after success after success. On the spur of the moment, he bought a fishing shop in Bridleton, in the UK there, because it seemed like a good idea. And how hard could it be to turn it around? Well, he made every mistake in the book. 2 years later, they closed. And he was a poorer man, though, of course, he was a wiser man. And so he found himself oddly glad. The failure made him look closely at himself and his pride. It made him turn to God and say sorry, of course, and he meant it. It was the turning point when he decided to take his faith seriously. This was his journey. He began the journey to ordination. Had the shop succeeded, he's sure he would have been insufferable, bigger ego, and it would have set him up for an even grander failure in the future. So, in my own faith, Christ's time on earth looked like a mission failure. But that was what St. Paul calls Christ's emptying of the flesh and mind, right? Jesus ended up dying a criminal's death on the cross. The church itself would take centuries to grow from a small sect. At the time, it was the Roman emperors with their gold and their armies and their power who modeled success. But no, there was another chapter to come, of course. We are promised that in the upside-down world of God, the last will be first. Note that. Will. It is ominous for those who have all the power and apparent success now. As St. Paul puts it, God's foolishness is wiser than human wisdom, and God's weakness is stronger than human strength. And so, at the end of all this, the stories, this homily, I leave you with this. One day the losers, the dropouts, the ill, the sad, the lonely, the poor, all those people that do not seem to embody success will be leading the parade. They will, it's guaranteed. And isn't that often the case in our world today? I'm sure right now you can think of a few cases, right? Well, thank God is what I have to say. That's a wrap on today's episode. Thank you for your time, and let's remember our shared humanity yesterday, today, forever, and always.